Welcome to the Wealth Stream Podcast. The team at Hightower Great Lakes share their insights and passions for empowering their clients to live their best life. In this energetic podcast, we will take you on a journey to help you navigate your financial future, overcome life's challenges to reach your financial goals, and find the financial clarity you've been searching for. Let's explore the downstream impact of your wealth and what it means to you, your family, and your community to live greater.
Hello and welcome to the Wealth Stream with Tim Scannell. Today we're going to be talking about lifelong learning, which I think is incredibly important, and I know you do too, Tim. Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much.
All right. Today, like I said, we're talking about lifelong learning. What are we talking about? I mean, are we talking about lifelong learning in general, like every type of subject? Are we talking one specific subject?
I guess it all relates to our primary goal when we help entrepreneurs, business owners. We're helping them prepare for their sale, their business to exit, ultimately then using the proceeds to, make sure that they're getting the maximum return on life. Then ultimately after that, making sure they're passing that wealth down to the next generation. So really lifelong learning that I want to talk about today really relates specifically to the processes we have in place to help our clients prepare the next generation to receive the wealth, to make sure it benefits them.
Yep, and a lot of these podcasts that we've done they focus around that business transition, exiting a business. Can you give us just a little bit of what we spoke about on the last podcast, just kind of refresh our memories?
Sure. I guess when I talk to our clients, when I do research about generational wealth planning for the wealthy, what they'll tell you or what you'll find is that the cause of wealth transfer failures, I guess, would be really not so much that the attorneys or accountants didn't do a good job. A lot of times it's really the fact that there's poor communication, lack of transparency between the generations, between the siblings, between parents and grandparents, et cetera. And really what that does is that creates a lot of family dynamics issues. And it all really ties back to just lack of information sharing. So we talked last time about family meetings and family meetings as a tool that a lot of families will use to, address those issues, to create the transparency, to create better and more communication, to prepare, the next generation to receive the wealth.
Yeah, open communication.
Open, exactly. And I think last time I talked about, a sample meeting agenda for one of the meetings we coordinated where, they got together at a nice resort. They kind of checked in the morning, had breakfast, reviewed, and then they talked about family financial status. So, the advisors came in, they kind of talked about the mission statement, and then they kind of transitioned into what I call the lifelong learning discussion or plan. And this is what I wanted to focus on mostly today.
All right. Sounds good. Lifelong learning plan or program, what does that entail?
Well, basically, one of the things that we do when we help clients set up a lifelong learning plan is, first of all, we have experience doing it. We've got processes that we've gathered through a lot of different resources, a lot of different families we work with. We've got a highly certified team. But when we do this with clients, it really starts with their goals. We try to draw out kind of what behaviors they want to encourage among their family members, what kind of values they want to instill or pass along to the next generation. And then also we spend a lot of time kind of identifying what skill sets the family members have, and then also what skill sets that, need to be developed. And I guess when we bring this up with different clients, the first question we'll typically get is, why do we need to do this? Because it is a lot of work. And I think what we find with experience, but also just through research, is that smart owners who are trying to transfer the wealth need to have smart beneficiaries, and they need to protect their kids, their grandkids from predators that are out there trying to take advantage of them. And so the education process oftentimes really helps the next generation protect the wealth for themselves, but also for their future.
Hey, Tim, let me ask you a question. I don't want to throw you off track here, but what is one of the most surprising things that you've encountered during one of these family meetings or during one of these lifelong learning plans and discussions that kind of threw you for a loop, or really you were able to help change for a family?
Initially, when we started doing them, it was surprising, but surprising in the sense that there's always this aha moment, or typically is there an aha moment where you'll find a parent and a child, or a parent and grandchild conclude all of a sudden that they had completely different perspectives on some issue, and the issues vary. And I say it was surprising, and now it's not, because really that's when I see that, I know we're making progress. But that's really how I measure success. If all of a sudden, two different people or groups of people see each other's perspectives and kind of change how they approach those dynamics, that's the most surprising. It's not anymore because it's so common.
Yeah, and I think that would be such a huge relief off of a family in general, especially, I'll say grandparents, but I mean the people, I guess, who I would identify as your clients, the people that you're running this for or doing this for. I think that would be such a huge relief for them to be able to say, okay, now they get it, right? Now my family understands what my desires truly are. Even though they may have said it, it took you guys to kind of bring it to the table and say it maybe in a different way, or help the rest of the family to actually listen with very open ears and open hearts to what their desires or wants or needs are.
Exactly, because when we talk to clients who are going through the process of preparing the estate plan, the tax plan, generational wealth planning, and we ask them what their biggest challenges are, they typically, the number one issue is, I just want to make sure that my children are productive adults, my grandchildren are productive adults, and I want to make sure that whatever wealth we transfer to them, is a source of opportunity, satisfaction. It helps them fulfill their life. And they just want to be, make sure that the children are prepared also for the responsibilities, because there's a tremendous amount of responsibility when you receive, especially large amounts of wealth, to the community, to the history, to the legacy, et cetera. So that's what clients tell us. And so oftentimes we try to drive the education plan around that. And, all you have to do is look around and read the paper, and you could see just so many examples of situations where it didn't work, right? I mean, I think the most recent one I saw was, Johnny Depp, famous actor, filing bankruptcy. But even like Lisa Marie Presley is a great example where she filed bankruptcy, after receiving the wealth from her father Elvis. But there's also, I think, examples where, our education plans try to focus on protecting the next generation. For example, like Tim Duncan, famous basketball player, he's going through a process where he's suing his former financial advisors because there was fraud. So you have to really understand how to read financial statements. And there's a lot of things that you don't have to be a CPA, but you just have to know basics so that you're going to protect yourself, protect your kids, your grandchildren from fraud also.
Yeah, absolutely. And having a team around you is so important to do that. So where do you begin in this process, Tim?
Well, generally what we do in the beginning is we try to establish, I guess we say we start with the end in mind. And what that means to us is we talk to the family and we try to get as many people involved in these conversations to identify what the goals are. So when I talk to the parents, but also to the kids, what are the goals for an education plan? For example, I have one client who sold a business about 1.5 years ago, and his passion is first responders. His passion is, volunteer firefighters. You go to a city like Chicago or New York, et cetera, and you have paid firemen. But across the country, if you look at it, the majority of firemen are volunteer. And his passion is really to set up a foundation and a funding mechanism to help train and support those people. And so that became a really important driver for the education plan, because that's a really important driver for them. So, finding out what goals they have are really critical. The next thing we do really is when we talk to the parents and when we look to the next 2 generations, we try to help them develop through a series of questionnaires, what are the strengths that some of your children and grandchildren have. Obviously, they're not all known because, at different ages. And then what are those skill sets that maybe we need to focus on to develop areas where they're not expertise in? When I look at my own family, I have a son who's an actor. I have a son who's focused on animation. Yet they're both, so you think of that as artsy, and I'm an accountant. But I have found that they are really super entrepreneurial and also very responsible financially. So I don't necessarily need to focus on, reading balance sheets or financial statements with them because they seem to have a pretty good handle on it. I might work on some other areas where like philanthropy might be a focus that I might help them with.
Yeah, or investing. Maybe they don't know much about investing, but something that they're going to need to learn especially when they become successful as artists or actors.
Exactly.
They don't want to. You don't want them buying a gold toilet, right?
No, that's right. You don't want them to be Johnny Depp.
I think that's MC Hammer. Yeah, I think MC Hammer had a gold toilet before he went bankrupt. Yeah, exactly. Definitely very important. So it almost sounds like you're running a SWOT analysis, right, for the family in a way.
Exactly, and then I work with a number of entrepreneurs, business owners, and understandably, they would also like to promote entrepreneurship, and so do I. And so that's maybe one of the behaviors you want to encourage. So we try to talk to clients about, when we create this education plan, what kind of behaviors you do want to create. And one of the best things I've found is a program through Junior Achievement. I mean, I think a lot of people might have heard about it. A lot of people might be aware of it. I taught a few volunteer Junior Achievement classes in high schools around the area, but also in some middle schools. And they have phenomenal, tried and true, proven financial education curriculums that are just wonderful. And they're very, they really promote entrepreneurship. So I've tried to take some of those also and, apply those with some of my clients and incorporate them into some of our education plans.
That's great. I like that.
And then the other one is, what values, another category I should say is what values does the client want to instill? And, an example of there is we oftentimes will recommend clients set up a donor advised fund and put money in there and then get their children or grandchildren involved in picking where that money goes. And a lot of times we'll just say, like right now, Thanksgiving is this week. The Christmas holidays come in a month. Those are phenomenal opportunities where you're connecting with children and grandchildren to bring those topics up, to have those conversations, and to get them involved in donor advised funds so you can help instill values. And that's part of an education plan. So it doesn't have to be going to school.
Yeah, Tim, a visual just literally flashed in my head when you said that. With the donor advised fund, I really liken it to teaching a kid how to ride a bike, right? I mean, it's you have them on the bicycle, they've got their helmet on. For some of the parents out there, they've got knee pads on, elbow pads, skid mark things, whatever you call them, and the kid is bubble wrapped maybe, but you're running alongside the bicycle. You're holding onto the back of the seat, or you've got a hand on the child and you've got a hand on the bike, guiding them as they're trying to get that balance, right? Find that balance so that they can take off. And I think that's the picture that I think of when you do something like a donor advised fund, or you're having them come to a charity and help you alongside you to see why it's so important to you. Any of those teaching opportunities, those moments, I really think it's kind of like that, where you're getting ready to let them go, but they've got to find that balance before that happens.
Exactly. And those are, they're, like you just said, teaching opportunities. That's really what they are.
Yeah.
And so you think of your own calendar. You don't have to schedule these formal events. I mean, I recommend you do, but even if you can't, you take advantage of opportunities where you're going to be together as these teaching opportunities.
So what else could you be doing?
I think when you're looking at how to design a plan or looking at things to do, we look at it as there's a few skills you're trying to help the next generation master. For example, I want to make sure that they understand where the money came from, the values, the history of the money, because your kids probably do because they see you as your parents. But the grandchildren and great-grandchildren are so far removed from how the money was generated that an education plan is really valuable for helping them understand it and respect it. But also, we really need to, at the very least, make sure that the children and grandchildren are getting just your basic financial, literacy, how to read an income statement, what is a balance sheet. They don't have to be accountants or CPAs. They don't have to be finance majors. They should know savings, investing, just basics at the very least.
Yeah.
And also awareness of just basic legal. They may be a trustee. They may be asked to be a trustee. They, at the very least, we want to have an attorney involved, just describing, at the very least, some basic information about understanding of the legal duties and rights, et cetera. Also, we want to introduce them to financial advisors, the attorney, the CPA, the trust officer, the investment manager, because they're going to have to work with these people and they're going to want to develop a team that can work with them over their lifetime. And so if I'm working with grandparents or parents, I really stress that I'm 56. If the kids are maybe in their 30s or 40s, I need to help them develop a team that's closer to their age, because I want them to have a strong team of advisors that they can work with for the next 20, 30 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
So those are the skills we're trying to master, I should say.
Oh, that's great. No, I mean, it makes perfect sense.
And then as we get into the nuts and bolts, and as we design a specific, education plan, we might have information on budgeting, spending, savings, investing, like you mentioned earlier, reading financial reports. I look back and I think with Tim Duncan, because I've read about the fraud he's accused his advisors of, and some of that might have been prevented if he had just been paying a little more attention. I'm not blaming him at all. The advisors might have done something terrible. But basic information about that would be helpful. One thing we've started to incorporate in the last year or two is very specific investing topics that clients have asked for, like impact investing. How can I make sure that when I am investing the money, that it's not that the investments I'm making are not supporting things I don't like? That could be cigarettes. That could be guns. I mean, these are issues clients have come up. Or also, how could it support causes I'm for? There's green funds. There's environmental funds. There's all kinds of things that we can help and we can customize. But we like to offer little clinics or meetings that cover impact investing. And another one that we've really tried to introduce in the last year and a half, 2 years is and women investing. I know investing is investing, but the reality is that there's different preferences, different styles, different things people want to do. So Mackenzie in our office is a CFP, and she's focused a lot of her energy on really coming up with very specific programs directly addressing women. And those have been very well received.
Yeah, Tim, I applaud you because that is such a huge area. As a coach and a consultant, I have helped a few different advisors start women's groups that have absolutely exploded because they take they take all the wonder out of it. They just have meetings with all the ladies, and it's ladies only. So they feel very empowered, and they learn things. They get to ask open questions, and each meeting has its own theme. And it sounds like you're kind of doing a lot of the educational pieces that is much needed, because just historically, and this is not to be sexist, but historically, men have done most of the decision making with the investments. Just this goes way back into the 40s and 50s when they had their pension, they were the primary breadwinner, and so we're trying to get out of that so we can empower these ladies to ask the questions that need to be asked and know all the ins and outs of different types of investing. Like you said, they might have a passion for some values-based investing or BRI type investing, and they can find those answers at these types of workshops and seminars.
Yeah, and so, yeah, exactly. We have found that people are really asking for it, and understandably, we're trying to deliver that, and it's being really well received.
That's awesome. That's great to hear.
The other factors that we look at when designing a formal plan, and again, all these factors depend on what the client is looking for, what the skill sets they have and don't have, but we'll cover estate planning. Sometimes we'll get into specifically prenuptial agreements or special needs trusts. These are unique documents that some clients are very interested in having part of their plan. Responsibilities as trustees, but what is, the different beneficiary tax impacts, philanthropy. One of the big ones we're also focusing a lot on, and you can imagine why, is social media.
Oh, yes.
And I mean, we're incorporating a lot of social media and security now into our education plans, because The family name is the family brand. That's we consider that part of wealth. We consider the ability to transfer the name, the legacy down to the next generation as really important, maybe more important than transferring money. The world of social media out there is just, it can be super damaging very quickly. And, training for security, preventing hacking, that's become a more and more important part of our plans.
Absolutely. The war front is not just in the field. It's the cyber crimes that are happening that are just really doing some serious damage. So, yeah, I agree.
And then, once we design a plan, we come up with the specific criteria that the family wants. We try to identify then, what resources do we have to go out and get? What resources or programs are out there? So do we need facilitators, for example, for some of these? Should we go out and get some curriculum guides for others? One of the things we found has been helpful is, I know, again, where Thanksgiving is this week, with the holidays, oftentimes when you're not watching football or when you're not eating, people like to do puzzles, have board games. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a number of great financial board games or just games in general that also have education in them. My wife actually pointed out, there was an article she read this week that they've developed a new version of Monopoly where, instead of buying real estate for the millennials, they're buying experiences, right? So, it's kind of funny, but that's an example of a 100-year-old board game that is adapting to this next generation.
Interesting.
Yeah, and last year, I went out and got a virtual reality headset system, and I watched my two sons play this game called Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes. Sounds like a crazy title, but
that's interesting.
It's literally, it's one person with the virtual reality headset, and he's somewhere near a bomb, and then there's the other person with a microphone speaker who is reading out of a book, and together they have to defuse the bomb without getting exploded.
Huh.
And but it was so intriguing watching them that as they went on and did this and working together and collaborating, they got better at it and they quit exploding. But it was just kind of a neat educational virtual reality tool. So there's things out there like that.
I've never heard of that. That is really neat.
Yeah, I even, so my animation son, I've identified there's some comic books out there that, one's called Saving the Day, mm-hmm. and it's literally about saving. So, you can really customize to skill sets and come up with some unique examples of in your education plan.
Yeah, and they can be fun. So that's great.
And I think everything that I read says, regardless of what you put in the plan, regardless of the resources you add to it, you really have to make it consistent. You have to try and make it measurable in the sense that maybe you just rehash and say, hey, that wasn't a good idea. Maybe that was. The parents really have to try, if possible, to put some funding mechanism behind it. Whether it's I've had clients set up a very specific fund for education. I've also had clients agree to pay for a big family trip where education mm-hmm. becomes maybe half a day of it. Mm-hmm. But I think that it works best when the family funds it, puts some money towards it, or at least effort and resources, but also does it consistently. So it cannot be just like a one-off.
Exactly. Yep. Consistency is key for anything. Any type of education, any type of learning. Come on. Who took Spanish in junior high or high school and doesn't know anything?
Exactly.
I didn't keep it up. So, yeah. Hola. That's about it.
I took German in high school, and then 4 years later went to Germany, and I tried my best, and they would look at me and say, okay, thank you for trying, but what do you want?
Let's just talk English. Let's speak English.
Exactly.
That's funny. All right. What else do we have to cover today, Tim?
Well, I think I've covered what we do, how we go through the process of identifying, creating, mm-hmm. Getting resources together for a plan. One of the things I wanted to maybe cover at the next podcast is something, another tool. So we talked about family meetings, and we talked about incorporating lifelong learning within them. One of the pieces of lifelong learning, for me anyway, as a bias towards entrepreneurship, is a learning process that we create that we call a family bank. And I thought maybe the next podcast, we could talk specifically about how we create a family bank, how we incorporate that into the family meetings, lifelong learning plans, and really improve communication about entrepreneurship and improve education about entrepreneurship, but it also is a really good tax planning tool. So it's kind of a triple whammy. I really like it.
Okay, next podcast, creating a financial bank.
Yes.
Sounds good. All right, do you have any closing thoughts for us today?
I'll just leave you with that. Again, we're fiduciary advisors for our clients and our families. And if you're a business owner, entrepreneur, it's really never too early to plan, not just for the exit of your business, but the preservation of your wealth, and then ultimately the transfer of that wealth to the next generation. And it's definitely never too early to start communicating with and preparing that next generation for receiving the wealth. And we have a very highly certified, experienced team, and we'd love to work with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today, Tim.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You bet. And thank you all for listening to the Wealth Stream Podcast with Tim Scannell. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Tim comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family. Again, thanks so much for listening today. For everyone at the Wealth Stream Podcast, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Wealth Stream Podcast. We hope you gained some valuable insight that you can apply to your life and share with others. Please don't forget to subscribe below to be notified when new episodes become available. And don't forget to live greater. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Hightower Great Lakes. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. Hightower Great Lakes is a group of investment professionals registered with Hightower Securities LLC, member FINRA and SIPC, and with Hightower Advisors LLC, a registered investment advisor with the SEC. Securities are offered through Hightower Securities LLC. Advisory services are offered through Hightower Advisors LLC.